Okay, so it's this time of the year again. Another one of my students says goodbye. Well, not quite yet. I think we have still another month where Alex will stay here. But he's basically finished. This is the last step in his doctoral studies, the public defense. And once that is passed, he can call himself a doctor, and a very well-deserved doctor, I have to say. So that's your last hurdle. You have to convince the audience that what you did is indeed interesting and original. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin, for a wonderful introduction. So let's start the slideshow. So this is the title of my thesis. It's Data Structures and Algorithms for Data Parallel Computing in a Managed Runtime. And hi. So this is my name. This is my lab that I worked in. It's called LAMP. EPFL, well, you know what EPFL is. It's this university that we're on. And during this presentation, during the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to try to explain what this means. What are the data structures and algorithms for data parallel computing in a managed runtime? Okay, so before I begin, does anybody know which city this is? St. Petersburg, that's right. So that's a good one. So St. Petersburg is a city of rich cultural heritage, of many museums, many beautiful galleries. You can really see a lot of cultural heritage there. And it's also well known for pretty good food and pretty good restaurants. And in particular, when I visited this place in December, the restaurant I visited was this one. It's called Dans le Noir. So for non-French speakers, it means in the dark. And you can also see the Cyrillic version on Russian underneath, which I think like the ex-Yugoslavian crowd will find funny here. But anyway, what's particular about this restaurant is that if you take a look inside, there's no light. And that's not because the workers have gone on a holiday, just because there is no light inside. They're, for some reason, saving electricity. And the reason is that people working in there are blind. They don't see. So they're like it's a restaurant completely run by blind people. And when you get in there, somebody takes you, they lead you by the hand, and they sit you down. And this is what it looks like inside the restaurant. So like, just sit here, they take your order, you're waiting, and hopefully eventually food arrives. Okay? So we're sitting there, and I was like wondering how can they manage? I mean, how can you run a restaurant where you don't see anything? It's like it's a tricky thing. And I was sitting like that until in the corner I saw this guy. Which you probably cannot see so well right now, but maybe if I do this. This is what it looked. This is what it looked like for me as well. By the way, like it takes some time for your eyes to adapt, you know. And then it turned out that this guy sitting in a corner was the regular guest. And how do you know that? Well, because he brings an IR camera to the restaurant. He likes to see what he's eating. So we talked with him a little bit, and he was kind enough to give me this IR camera so that I could see like what's actually going on in the restaurant. And since he was the guest from day one, he knew everything what was happening in this restaurant, how it was organized, and how it all worked out. And he was kind enough to share a little bit of history of this restaurant with us. So here's what it looked like. Initially in the restaurant, there was only one worker, okay? And he was like in an empty room. He decided at one point he should buy maybe some stuff to run the restaurant. One of them was the microwave. And he figured that is enough, since it's a restaurant where you eat in the dark. You don't really see your food, so you can just, preheat. Like he can just heat preheated food, right? And another important thing that he had in this restaurant is a dishwasher. And this is the hardest part of the work. For anybody who's making food, you should know, like, this is easy, this is really hard. And of course, what the restaurant had is some chairs, right, for the customers to sit, to come in and eat. And, like in this restaurant in which you don't see anything, if you want to work well here as a blind worker, what you have to do is you have to have a really good short-term memory. So you really have to remember well what your customer ordered. You have to remember well what you have on your tray. Like, do you have dirty plates? Do you have clean ones? And so on. And you have to, like, at every point know what you will do next. So it turned out that the way that this worker worked is that he initially, in his short-term memory, decided that he'll keep 3 sets of things. One of them is orders. Orders are the things that your customer ordered, right? Then the second thing is dishes. This is the things that he's carrying on his tray, and he has to give to certain customers, clients. And then the third set is dirty. So if he picked up some dirty plates, he has them on the tray. He has to know that he has them so that he could deposit them here at the dishwasher. So the way that he would work is he would walk around from one table to the next one. When he gets to the dishwasher, he would leave the dishes there. And finally, he would cook something. So let's look how it looks like when the first client arrives. And then you can see this is the first client with the IR camera there. So he sees in the dark. And so what he did, he decided, OK, I'll go to this first table, and I'll take my order. And it turned out that the order was chicken. OK? And at this point, he went through all the other tables. And he saw there's nothing else to do. And he walked to the dishwasher. At this point, his dirty set is empty. There's nothing to wash. So he doesn't do anything at the dishwasher. He just continues to the microwave. And at the microwave, he sees the order is chicken. He takes some frozen chicken, warms it up, and brings it to the client. And then the client quickly eats it. Yeah?
Why did he go to the dishwasher?
Well, it turns out that if you're working in a dark restaurant, you better stick to the protocol. Oh. So if you start, so like in restaurant management, there's this principle which is called the KISS principle. It's like keep it simple, stupid. Yeah. So if you try to be smart and walk away from this principle, then strange things may happen. So you really, really want to make sure that you have a simple protocol, which is to walk around all the time. And so it turns out that what this worker did, he had like a well worked out sequence of steps, exactly what you asked. It's like, first for each table, I'll collect the request, serve the dish, and collect the dirty plate, if there is any one of these bullets to do. Then I'll walk to the dishwasher and wash the dirty plates that I have. Then finally, in the third step, I will go up here to the microwave and cook the requested dishes, cook, so to speak. And then it turns out that in restaurant management, they call this well predefined sequence of steps an algorithm. That's just their terminology for who knows what reason. And then what happened next after this client was served is that another client arrived. So when the other client arrived, he collected the dirty plate, which was the chicken, walked down here, collected the request, which is an omelet in this case. He served the dish. He didn't have anything to serve at this table, nor something to collect. So he washed the dirty plates. Now his dirty set is empty. Then he walked up there to the microwave, converted the omelet into a dish, and served it, and so on. But then the next thing that happened is that the third client arrived, one more. And like at this time, there are a lot of clients to serve. There's not just one or two. It turns out that there are more clients than there are actual workers. And what clients want is to not wait for a long time to get the dish served, right? So we can calculate what the time is as follows. So we can notice that there is some time that this restaurant worker needs to do a full cycle around the restaurant, okay? And this time is exactly equal to the time between the customer makes his request, his order, and gets the dish served back. So these two times are equal, right? And what is this time of walking around equal to? Well, it's n, where n is the number of customers, times the time spent on each table, plus the washing time for each dish, again times n. Why is it again times n? Well, because in the worst case, he could have collected the dirty plates for all the tables, right? And similarly, he could have collected the orders from all the tables, so you have to add n times the cooking time for the microwave, right? And so if you know the basic math, you know that you can pull this n out of the equation. You can add these two values together. You can just represent them with one constant, which is the per table time. This is the universal constant in restaurant management. Okay? So also in restaurant management, they say that this algorithm is an O of n algorithm. Why is that? Well, because as the number of clients grows, the total time grows as well with the same speed, right? And that's why it's called O of n. And you want to keep this time low. Well, you see, like the thing is, in a restaurant, you have people waiting for food. And when you have people waiting for food, for some evolutionary reason, they tend to get aggressive, right? And the other thing is, in a restaurant, you also have bottles lying around. And then things like this can happen. And this is the reason why I didn't leave any bottles in this room also, in the case my talk gets long. But so we have this O of n algorithm. And the thing is, you want to reduce this n as much as possible. So then you can notice this per table time is equal to some amount of work that you have to do at a table divided by the worker speed, which is natural, right? The faster you work, the smaller this quantity will get, right? That's why I'm dividing here with the worker speed. So if you increase your speed, customers will wait shorter, which sounds pretty reasonable, right? And so the worker, the single worker, he realizes that, and then he realizes that he has to start running around the restaurant to serve everybody. So this is what he starts doing. He runs around. It works very well. He's a little bit tired. But then a fourth client arrives. So if you want to, reduce this time again, then you have to increase the worker speed some more. He has to run faster and faster. But the problem is that, there's a physical limit as to how much a worker can run, right? Even if the restaurant manager or the owner decides to fire this guy and hire Usain Bolt here, there is still a physical limit as to how far he will go, despite the amount of money that he pays for Usain Bolt being a waiter. And the conclusion is that one worker, he cannot do everything. And this is the first lesson. How do you try to address this issue? Well, in restaurant management, they say that work needs to be parallelized. It means that you have to take several workers and make them work at the same time on different tasks. And this is exactly what these workers decided to do. So another worker came along, and then they decided, let's take this algorithm, let's somehow try to spread this algorithm that we have between us so that the total amount of time becomes smaller. So this is what they did. They said, okay, the first waiter will just go through the tables, collect orders, and cook the dishes, and bring them back. While the second waiter will collect the dirty plates and wash them, which is consistent with what you see in some restaurants, because you have different people serving you, taking orders, and so on. So they no longer use this original algorithm. They use two different algorithms, which have divided the tasks of the original algorithm, and that's why they call this a task parallel algorithm. Okay? But note about this task parallel algorithm, if you do some basic math about this, and if you assume that each task takes approximately the same amount of time, then the new time is the old time that you needed to serve n customers divided by 1.5. It's not really important that you see y is constant. Maybe you see, maybe not. But the point is really, if you do the math, you're going to get some constant amount by which you can decrease this time. But this is not good enough. And the reason why it's not good enough is because if the n grows more, this constant doesn't help you much. You can just accommodate for 50% more customers, but then after that, the time starts growing again, right? What you really want to do is you want to take any number of workers, P, and divide the customers between them. And this is a different approach than a task parallel algorithm. This one is called data parallel algorithm, because restaurant workers sometimes refer to their clients as data. So what I want to show you now is like what does this data parallel algorithm looks like. And in this data parallel algorithm, basically what you want to do, you want to focus on one or several of these clients and do something for them. And I'm not going to try to create a data parallel algorithm for all these steps. I want to keep it simple and just take the wash dirty plate states. Just this one. And this is called data parallel dishwashing. And it turns out like if you want to describe a problem, some kind of an algorithmic problem, then you have to describe it as a set of inputs and outputs. And in this case, the input is a set of dirty plates, and the output is a set of clean plates. And in this algorithmic problem, you want to, from the input, get to the output as fast as possible. And let's assume that you have two workers here. So what can they do? Here's one idea. What's a natural idea that what they can do is just take these plates, which are here, and divide them equally. Just take one half, give it to the left guy, the other one to the right. So they're not exactly an even number of plates. This one gets 4, the other gets 5, but we can conclude this is good enough. And what happens then is that they start working. And each one of them takes one plate, they start washing it, and the left guy is washing, the right one takes one more plate, the right one takes 2 more plates. Finally, the right one finishes and starts idling around. Well, this guy is not finished with his work. And from this you might conclude that the left guy here is just being lazy. He's not very efficient in washing dishes. But it turns out that's not the case. What could also have happened is that if you use your IR camera, you might have seen that these plates on the right were actually not so much work. You had to remove a little bit of broccoli here and bacon and I don't know. But you could clean it reasonably easy. Whereas the left guy got this, which is why he was stuck at the first pot, right? And what's the conclusion? What's the lesson here? Well, the lesson is that workload is irregular. And when you're sitting in the dark, you don't see how irregular it is. If you just divide these 2 plates between 2 people, then you don't know what actually quantity of work you're given to each of them. And it turns out that if these 2 workers want to divide the workload between them more efficiently, what they need to do is communicate more often. And this is called synchronization. What's synchronization? That's coordination of work used to operate a restaurant in unison. And what kind of synchronization do we usually use? Do you have some idea? So synchronization is really something that you use like in your day-to-day work with your colleagues. Huh? Talk, exactly. Huh? Sorry? Coffee breaks, exactly. But that's talking, right? So like talking is some verbal synchronization. That's a basic kind of synchronization that you should use in this case. But the problem is it doesn't really work in this kind of a restaurant. And why is that? Well, that's because you have different workers. One of the workers, as the restaurant grows larger, turns out to be a really good dishwasher, but he likes to listen to music while he's working. Why does he do that? Well, it's totally dark and nobody can see anything, so he just put his Walkman on and his boss can't say anything because he doesn't see it, right? So then there's another guy. So this guy is in charge of providing the meat for the restaurant. Here you can see him chasing a chicken with a chainsaw. And as you can imagine, this produces a lot of ruckus, a lot of noise. And then finally, there's some cultural exchange workers, like this French guy over here, and nobody can understand what he's saying. So, the point really that I'm trying to illustrate here is that verbal synchronization is not possible. What's the advantage of verbal synchronization is that you could immediately say something and immediately everybody else would know what you said. But in this restaurant, this just doesn't work. You cannot immediately say anything. So it's very loud and it's dark. And what's left, the only option that's left to you is tactile synchronization. And this means that you can feel something in the dark, you can remember it in your short-term memory, and then act based on that. It's pretty much the only thing that you can do. And let's try to see how we can take advantage of this tactile synchronization to more efficiently divide the plates between these 2 workers. Well, here's an idea. Let's write down an algorithm. Let's say that this algorithm is now run by the right worker. And first he needs to take one plate from the top at a time. So he takes the first one. And then if he takes the same plate simultaneously as the other worker, and he can feel that due to like some force being applied from the other side, he should let go of it. And then the left worker knows that his idea is left worker. I'm the left guy. I will then retry with the same plate. Whereas the right says, I'll retry with the next plate. This is how they synchronize, in case something like this happens. So this guy now figures out that nobody's pulling this plate, so I won't let go, and I'll just take it, and then in the first step, I'll wash the plate. Okay, and then I can proceed with the next plate. So, but the thing that now happens is that this left worker also grabs the plate, the next plate. And he thinks, okay, there's somebody else grabbing the plate, I'll let go and I'll take the same plate. This guy says, I'll let go, I'm the right worker, I'll take the next plate. And then what happens is that these two workers, they don't work exactly with the same speeds. One is a little bit faster than the other. So what the right guy does, he grabs the second plate, he pulls it out, and he decides I can wash it now. And then this one falls down and breaks. And as a result of their data parallel dishwashing, they broke some plates, which is not what you want to do. What we say about this kind of synchronization is that synchronization costs are too high. And lesson number 3 is that synchronization can be too expensive. And I guess you all know this from your day-to-day work. If you have some really small task that you want to do, you don't want to send an email to divide it in half to let somebody else do how to work, because you'll end up waiting for a long time for him to reply and to convince him eventually to do it. And you'll just do it yourself. Sometimes you don't want to pay for the synchronization costs. So here's another idea that you can do to avoid this kind of synchronization problems from happening. And it is to use some kind of an object called a lock. Okay? So what is a lock? Well, a lock is an object which, when you have it, when you're holding the lock, nobody else can do something. In this case, if you're holding the lock, nobody else can take the plate until you put the lock back. So here's the idea of the algorithm. Let's say that the right worker is executing it. First, he takes the lock, okay? And the lock is not like a plate; it's pretty small. If you grab it, it's only you who grab it, not somebody else. So two people cannot grab the lock at the same time because it's pretty small. So he grabs it. And then if the left guy decides to grab it, what he'll do in the dark, he'll try to catch it like this, and let's see there's nothing there. And then he'll decide to wait, and we try later when there's again a lock sitting at the top. And then the right guy, he decides in the next step to take one plate. He's holding the lock, he has the right to take plates. He does so. In the first step, he puts the lock back on the table, and then he washes the plate. While he's washing the plate, somebody else can do these three steps, because the lock is again at the top. Right? So let's assume now the left guy takes the lock, and then he takes one plate. It's good. And now he decides to wash it, and the right guy has to wait while he's holding the lock. And just as the left worker is about to put the lock back on the top of the plates, something bad happens. His boss arrives. So this big guy over here. And he tells him, like, come here, I gotta talk to you a little bit. So the guy looks over, and this guy says, you're fired. And this really gets to this guy, like it really affects him, and he gets a heart attack, he falls down, and he's incapacitated, he cannot work anymore. And the problem, it would be fine if this guy could continue working, but he can't, because this guy still has a lock in his hand. He's like grabbing really firmly to it, and nobody knows how to lock it in the dark. And that's a problem. Nobody can wash dishes anymore. So it's like wondering what we're going to do next. Since there's a lock involved, and this guy's lying dead on the floor, sometimes they refer to this situation as the deadlock. Okay, so this doesn't work. And the lesson here is locking, this kind of approach of locking, taking something, can arbitrarily slow down the restaurant process, the business process, anything else. If you want to do something exclusively, and if you fail while doing it, and don't return the resource back, then nobody else can do it in your stead. So it's not always good. So you have to try something else. And who knows what this is?
Braille.
Exactly, right. So this is Braille letter. It's something that blind people use to communicate, and sorry, not to communicate, but to read. Right? In the dark. So this is a book written in Braille letter, and if you're just feeling it in the dark, if you're very skilled with this, you can read the book actually by going left to right. You can get pretty fast with this. And the idea that I'm going to propose next is that maybe they should somehow use this. So maybe they should, write down a note in Braille and just leave it on the top of the plates.
so that the other guy can read it. Okay? But the thing is, you don't really want to do this for every plate Bible, because to write down a note, it takes some time if you're doing it with a pen, but if you're doing it in braille and you have to create all these little dots, then it takes an even more time. You don't want to, instead of washing the plates, write a lot of notes to synchronize between each other to take the next plate. So what you really want to do, you want to communicate and synchronize using these braille notes, but do it as least as possible, and ideally not at all, or only once. And so here's another idea. In this idea, they're going to use the braille letter, and I'll show shortly how. And what it starts with is that they don't share the plates at all. Initially, all the plates belong to one worker, only one. And then the algorithm is take a plate. If you can, go to step 3, and we'll see what the step 3 is. But if you can, then wash your plate and go back to step 1. And this is really simple. Like most of the time, we're just taking the plate and then washing it and going back, just like looping through. This is what you do most of the time. However, if there's a stealing note written in braille on top of this plate, then you cannot really take these plates anymore. In fact, you cannot really touch this pile of plates at all. What you have to do is you have to read the note in dark, and then you have to decide what to do next. Describe this shortly. You have to run this algorithm called help steal. Show you shortly what it is. Similarly, if you're done washing, if you washed everything, and you have no dishes left to wash, so you touch, there's nothing there, then you do something called stealing. And this is just not any kind of stealing. Usually when you steal, you try to get something to your benefit, to your advantage, right? And this particular type of stealing is a bit different. It's called work stealing, because you're not stealing any benefit, you're stealing extra work. You can discuss if it's a benefit or not. But if there's another worker who doesn't have dishes, then he has to find somebody else's dishes and steal them. And here's how he does it. He first finds somebody else's dishes, then he writes down a note written in braille on the dishes. And on this note, he writes, I want to steal half of your dishes. Let's divide them in half, and let's put them in 2 piles just in front. And this is what's written on this note. And then he runs the same algorithm, help steal, which is exactly the same as this help steal algorithm that the original worker does if he finds the note. So they together do the same thing if the note appears on the top, which is the following. So first they read the note, figure out what they have to do. Then they divide the dishes in 2 piles exactly as written in the note. And then assume that the left guy dies now. Okay? For whatever reason, or becomes incapacitated temporarily, he cannot proceed with the algorithm. But what the right guy will do, he will divide these plates. He will just pick them up and divide them. And when he does, he just needs to pick up one of these piles, so let's say he picks one on the right, and continue his work. Now what can happen is that this guy eventually wakes up. Turns out he wasn't feeling so bad after all, right? And then he finds that the braille note is there, the plates are no longer there, and he then figures out, well, if they're not there, if this guy did exactly what's written in the braille note, then the pile must be here, I'll walk down, I'll continue washing. And then he's not longer the stealer, he's a worker again. And because this algorithm doesn't have any locks, yeah?
How do you divide the dishes in the 2 piles concurrently without?
So it turns out that in restaurant management there are some operations which are called atomic operations. When you grab a heap of plates and you move it here and put it like this, then there's nobody who can interrupt you while you're doing this. The boss cannot come in and interrupt you in the middle of this action. So you either started doing it and you completed it, or you didn't start it at all. So that's the thing. And because this dividing, like it happens at once, this is like nobody can interrupt him. And if this right guy now dies at this one point before picking one of the piles, then the left guy can take over and continue. Right? So every step here is atomic. Yeah? And the beauty of this algorithm is sort of generalizes it. That means that if you have more workers in the restaurant, now if the third guy comes, But he can repeat exactly the same procedure, again with the right guy. And then he can create, again, 2 heaps of piles under another Bri node. And because this has to do with work stealing work, and because this structure that they end up with looks like a tree if you turn it upside down, this algorithm is called the work stealing tree scheduling algorithm. Anyway, the lesson here in this last algorithm is that you can avoid locks if you share information about what you're about to do with other workers. So if you let everybody know what you want to do, then if you fail, somebody else can read that and finish the work for you, help you. Okay? And at this point you might be asking yourself, what is this guy talking about? This is supposed to be about computer science, right? And I'm talking here about food and restaurants. Well, it turns out that there's an analogy here. So this is a presentation for general public. I wanted to create an analogy. Probably most of the people here figured it out. But if you have a restaurant with a worker, with some kind of a short-term memory, his tables and the client sitting over there, well, the restaurant itself is actually a computer system. It's this, okay? And then in this thing here on my table, there's something called a processor. And this processor, the way it works, it's really analogous and equivalent to this blind worker, okay? And here you can see an Intel Pentium processor. Which looks cool here, but it's actually not that cool. It's quite old. And this short-term memory, this is a special part of the computer system, which is very closely attached to the processor. It's called a processor cache. Processor cache is something that the processor uses to remember stuff about the tables. And then the tables themselves, they're actually something in a computer system called a shared memory. And you cannot, as a restaurant worker, you cannot see the shared memory at once, right? You can only see one little piece of it, like one table, specific table, put something about it, some information into your shared memory, short-term memory, and then proceed to the next table. So you don't have a consistent global view of the entire memory, you just see one little piece at a time. And the worker speed is something called the processor frequency. So every processor in every computer, turns out, works at a specific clock, which is actually the processor speed. And what processor vendors did for a long time, they were trying to increase this processor frequency to accommodate more and more clients coming to the restaurant. And then at one point they couldn't do it anymore. So the way they decided to respond to this is by introducing multiple workers, or something called a multi-core processor. It's a processor which has many blind workers working on it and accessing this shared memory. And what are clients? Well, clients are clients. Again, so it might be you or your kid sitting behind a computer, playing a game, or just your laptop that's left on and your cats come and press the button. Like it's some kind of an incoming request coming over the network or for somewhere else, and you want to respond to it as fast as possible. And so what's my thesis about? You should now know what this means. It's lock-free algorithms and data structures for data parallel computing. And besides data structures, I talked about all of these terms, but I left this one out because maybe someone gets interested and actually reads this thing. But there's like an analogy between what I talked about here and what's in my thesis. So I just want to summarize one more time these lessons learned. One is we need to work together if we want to finish tasks and be more efficient. And then the other is we cannot work closely together without synchronizing somehow. And we can, so you know, like you have to send somebody an email if you want him to do something, or have to go talk to him, or do a lot of other things to somehow transfer information between each other and coordinate. And sometimes when synchronizing takes too much work, you should just do it yourself, because maybe it's faster in the end, because synchronization too is work that you have and time that you have to spend. But if you do decide to do work with somebody else, you better make sure that you don't lock out your work, because if you lock and something happens to you, there's nothing that there's no way that they can help you finish the work. The work might be unfinished, and it might also have negative repercussions on your colleagues and so on. And finally, when people behave nicely, if you're sharing information with them, then it's a win, because if something happens to you, they help you. And lesson number 6 is always bring an IR camera to the Dan Lenoir restaurant, because you might learn something. And that's pretty much my talk, more or less. There are like a couple of small things that I also want to say now. There's actually in my thesis a pretty long acknowledgement section. It's almost a thesis on its own. It's impossible to reaccount like all the people one more time that I mentioned there. I'll just try to mention some of them who I found good pictures of. Like first and foremost, I want to thank my thesis advisor, Martin Odersky, because it was really a special thing to be a part of the whole Scala movement for the last 5 years. So thank you, Martin. And I also want to thank the entire LAMP lab, which is some of the people I found good pictures here of. One of them is Philip, and there's Heather, and there's Antonio, this is Phil, and Lucas, and Gilles, and this is Ingo on the left, Gilles in the back. Who can guess who this is? His head is flat. Doesn't even know when this picture was taken. And yeah, I want to thank my good friend who's been here with me from the start, from day one on PhD, and with whom I've been through many things together. His name is Tihomir, he's sitting over there. To extend on that a little bit, I want to thank my friends who have spent a lot of time here in Lausanne. They're also here in the audience, almost all of them. It's like Peja, Dražan, Mima. And then we can expand on that, make it bigger. Like I added Andreas here, and Mirko, and Bilja, and Sonia. Some of them are here. Let's see some more. Like it's Mike. Hi, Mike. It's Michelle. And it's Oleg. And there's, of course, Sasha, who I especially also want to thank. He's been with me through the last 2 years, and it's been a lot of support in getting this work done. And so thank you, Sasha, for all your patience. And finally, at the end, I want to especially thank my parents, Goran and Mariana, who are sitting here in the audience, who I'm very pleased that they came here, and I really appreciate it. Even though you came only for 1 day because you had to leave, somebody has to take care of our dog, so you'll be leaving quite shortly. I would have been happy if you stayed here longer, or if you come some other time, for a longer time, but really thank you for everything that you've given to me. So I want to say this. And yeah, so this is it. Now is the time for the question round. I just want to remind you there's also an apero down there, so don't take too long. And these things are getting cold, and these things are pretty good. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. So any questions? Yeah?
Why is this presentation so cool?
Thanks. Maybe some challenging question. Yeah?
I promise to ask this question.
Okay.
How can you make it faster?
Well, I don't know. It's a subject to another thesis. Yeah, you have to read it. We can take this question offline. Yeah?
So this restaurant business has been around for a long time, right?
Yeah?
So how come you only got now interested? Like, how come they didn't do this stuff before? Because it seems pretty, like, I mean, I would do that if I had a restaurant.
Well, what used to happen before, you did have like big restaurants, but they had much less time to think about these things. Well, because people weren't as wealthy before, and then you had only a couple of big restaurants here and there in the country where the wealthy people would come. All the other restaurants turned out to be able to accommodate, only one worker, and he just worked and served a few customers for some time, and not that many people came. But as people became more wealthy and more people started going to the restaurant, there came a need for restaurants to grow. And when you have a lot of things that have something in common, like a lot of restaurants that have a lot of workers, then they start sharing this information much faster about how they work, what kind of algorithms they employ, and so on. And this restaurant research business starts moving on much faster. And you came to learn some new ideas that you couldn't learn before because these restaurants were too much confined to isolated areas. So, okay, you get the, the big picture. Huh?
Yeah, can you give a teaser on what Data Structure's story might be?
Well,
Are there only, what do you do with trees and what part? Are there other cooler things than trees?
yeah, they're hash tables. No, well, I think you should read the thesis probably, but maybe one if you get around to it. But one maybe interesting thing is what happens if you have a lot of workers in the restaurant and you want to simultaneously, for some reason, find out how many plates they currently have left. Why do you want to do this? Because, for example, you want to do an inventory of all the plates in your restaurant. This is not something that you do every day. This is something that you do occasionally, like once a month. You want to find out that nobody broke any plates due to bad synchronization, or that no customer stole plates or stuff like this. And then the problem is, how can you create this inventory? How can you count the number of plates? Well, one way to do it is to tell all your workers, okay, stop working immediately now, and let me count the plates. And you go around, you spend the day counting the plates, and during this time, you didn't sell any food. So or you left your customers waiting, and this led to a bottle situation, right? But the thing that actually is described in this thesis is how can you, while the workers are working, immediately find out how many plates they have without interrupting their work. So the problem here is, if you have 3 workers and they have 10 plates, and the first one washes 5, and then you count that he has 5 left, and the next one washes 2, and you find out that he has 8 left, and then the next one has washed 7, but by the time you were half through your count, he washed some more, then you didn't really get a consistent number of plates, because you have to sum up the number of clean ones and the number of dirty ones. So if you try to draw this on a piece of paper, you'll find out that you'll get wrong numbers if you start counting while they're working. And what's described in this thesis is how can you do this consistently to really get the correct number. This is a teaser, the best one I could come up with. So, okay. Yeah?
So the good thing about a restaurant in the dark is that the clients can't see what they get. So you might exchange plates, or maybe a dish is not properly washed, where the client wouldn't be able to tell anyway. So can you say, if you, let's say, relax correctness a little bit, you allow so-called data races in the restaurant business, would you gain speed, and would that be a good thing to do?
Yes, I guess you could do this. I would have to find an analogy. Well, generally that's the case, in restaurant business. Like if you relax, if you allow that your customers get not so well prepared food, then you might get to serve them faster, right? And one example of this is actually the microwave, right? Well, they don't see that you didn't have a real cook in the kitchen and freshly prepared food, and you didn't have initially maybe this guy with a chainsaw running after the chicken, but you just had the microwave, right? And they can tell it in the dark. And this is how you can start your restaurant business really fast, right? So there is possibility for this, yeah.
Did you get a job offer from the restaurant?
Yeah, I did actually.
Hire blind people, maybe they can hire as Mr.
Yeah, it's actually a funny story because as you can see in this picture, we ordered 148 cevapi from a restaurant in Lausanne, and the guy was asking us as we were leaving, what do we study? So it might be that I'll get something pretty soon. So. Okay. So, any more questions?
Okay, so I think then it's my time again. I believe we all agree that Alex has well deserved the degree of Docteur et Sciences. To read it loud, so Aleksandar Prokopec a obtenu le grade Docteur et Sciences. Le candidat a prouvé son aptitude à la recherche scientifique en présentant la thèse intitulée Data Structures and Algorithms for Data Parallel Computing in a Managed Runtime.
Thank you very much.
Félicitations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sweet.
serious time to prepare a short speech. So
Thanks, Dad.
serious. This is my wife Mariana, and we are very proud to have Aleksandar. God, and thank God to have having blessed us. We know how much effort and he put in all his work. We wish you thanks, all of you guys, your friends, colleagues who participate in and contributed with his work. Especially, we want to thank Martin Odevsky, who had full confidence from the beginning to his capabilities and supporting and have been supporting and encouraging him. Also, we are happy Aleksandar met Sasha. His kindness and love will give him strength to future work, and hopefully, as always, parents like to see have a more tangible product in this We wish you all the best in your life and your work, and thank you all of you.
Thanks. Okay.
Martin, this is for you, small gift from Croatia.
So there's also a bit from all of us to show you. So now you can sit in the audience.
Okay.
I don't think I'll be as good with the presentation. Let's try. How do I open this? Okay.
Maybe you want to use this or?
Yes.
Good.
How do I start? Okay, so we all know Alex, and now he's a doctor. And during this, he spent really a lot of time at EPFL. He spent 5 years of his life there. And which skills did he acquire during this time? So when he arrived, he was a very little and unexperienced boy, as you can see, like funny, sitting on the bench. And then he started acquiring skills. He started learning new kinds of sports. So like one on the right, one on the top. Then he became really proficient in Dominion. Then he really learned how to cook well during this time and to feed the bunch of his hungry friends. Then he created the conspiracy algorithm. Look how it goes. Like first he observes what's going on around. Then he changes. Then he becomes even better. And then his last year, it's like this. And then, as you see, Alex trained a lot to give his talks. And he learned how to give talks to a general public. And then he also learned how to chill well after the long conference talks. We think all these skills would really help you in your future life. And we want all to congratulate you and to give you a present. And
Is that Santa Claus?
Wait. So yeah, it's the first half of our present. The second half you'll receive shortly, and then. No. Wait, but how can I? Where's the sound? Where's the sound? Can I have a sound?
I think you can if you do this. Is it okay?
Headphone.
Yeah, I think it's good.